Picture this. It's 1944, deep in the Burmese jungle. 3,000 American volunteers are about to embark on what would become one of the most grueling and heroic campaigns in U.S. military history. They were told only that they were volunteering for a dangerous and hazardous mission. They weren't even told where they were going. Over the next 5 months, these men would march 750 miles through some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, fighting Japanese forces while battling malaria, dysentery, and starvation. By the end, only 200 combat-effective soldiers remained out of the original 3,000. Yet somehow, against impossible odds, they achieved every objective assigned to them. This is the story of Merrill's Marauders, America's first and only ground combat unit to fight on the Asian mainland in World War II, and quite possibly the toughest special forces unit that ever served under the American flag. Officially designated as the 5,307th Composite Unit, Provisional, and codenamed Galahad, these men became known to the world as Merrill's Marauders after their commander, Brigadier General Frank Merrill. Born from President Roosevelt's vision and modeled after the British Chindits, they were America's answer to long-range jungle warfare in the forgotten theater of Burma. But what made them so special? And why did this elite unit suffer such devastating casualties while achieving legendary status? Today, we're diving deep into their incredible story, from their unconventional recruitment to their final heroic stand at Myitkyina, and why their legacy lives on in today's Army Rangers. The story begins in August 1943 at the Quebec Conference, where Allied leaders decided they needed an American version of the British Chindits, specialized long-range penetration forces that could operate behind Japanese lines in Burma. The goal was simple: disrupt Japanese supply lines, gather intelligence, and support the broader Allied effort to reopen the Burma Road, China's vital supply lifeline. President Roosevelt himself issued the call for volunteers for this mysterious, dangerous, and hazardous mission. About 3,000 men answered that call, coming from all corners of the American military. Some were battle-hardened veterans from Guadalcanal, New Guinea, and New Georgia. Others came from the jungles of Panama and Trinidad. Still others were basically the dirty dozen, men sitting in military prisons who were offered a chance at redemption in exchange for their service. What united them wasn't their backgrounds, but their willingness to volunteer for the unknown. They represented a truly diverse cross-section of America: college students and farm boys, city dwellers and outdoorsmen, seasoned soldiers and raw recruits. The only requirement was that they volunteered, knowing full well they might not come back. The unit was placed under the command of Brigadier General Frank Merrill, a career officer who spoke Japanese and Chinese and had served as a military attaché in Tokyo before the war. The press corps, struggling to find a catchy name for the unwieldy 5,307th Composite Unit, Provisional, settled on Merrill's Marauders, and the name stuck. After a grueling ocean voyage to India, the Marauders began intensive jungle warfare training under British supervision. They learned to operate behind enemy lines, how to call in air support, survival techniques, and perhaps most importantly, how to work with pack mules, their only means of carrying heavy equipment through the impenetrable Burmese jungle. The unit was organized into 6 color-coded combat teams: red, white, blue, green, orange, and khaki. Each team could operate independently or combine with others for larger operations. This flexibility would prove crucial in the fluid, fast-moving jungle warfare they were about to face. In February 1944, the Marauders entered combat for the first time. Their mission: march deep behind Japanese lines and capture the key airfield at Myitkyina, while supporting Chinese forces under General Vinegar Joe Stilwell. What followed was a masterpiece of unconventional warfare. The Marauders' first major engagement came at Wallabum, where they outflanked and surprised Japanese defenders, forcing them to retreat. General Merrill himself noted that together with Chinese forces, they had made the Japanese withdraw farther in 3 days than they had in 3 months of previous fighting. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few months, they would fight major battles at Shaduzup, Inkangatong, and Nunpumga, each time using their mobility and jungle expertise to outmaneuver and defeat larger Japanese forces. The Japanese 18th Division, elite troops that had conquered much of Southeast Asia, found themselves constantly harassed and surprised by these American ghosts in the jungle. What made the Marauders so effective also made their service incredibly costly. They carried everything they needed on their backs, or on pack mules. Food came from airdrops when the thick jungle canopy allowed it, which wasn't often. Medical evacuation was nearly impossible. Wounded men had to be carried out by hand through miles of hostile territory. The physical conditions were beyond brutal. The Burmese jungle was a tropical hell of 100-degree heat, torrential monsoons, and disease-carrying insects. Malaria was endemic. Dysentery was constant. Many soldiers lost 30 to 40 pounds during the campaign. They slept in mud, went days without hot food, and were constantly under threat of Japanese ambush. The psychological strain was equally devastating. These men were originally told they would be evacuated after 90 days of combat. Instead, General Stilwell kept pushing them forward, mission after mission, as the unit's strength dwindled. Soldiers fighting with high fevers became normal. Men with dysentery cut holes in their pants so they could relieve themselves while continuing to fight. Yet somehow their morale held. They had developed an incredible esprit de corps, a brotherhood forged in shared suffering that made them willing to endure the impossible for each other. When Japanese forces surrounded one of their units at Nopumga for over 2 weeks, the trapped Marauders held out while their comrades fought through enemy lines to relieve them. The Japanese began to respect and fear these American jungle fighters. Intelligence reports showed that the mere presence of Marauders in an area forced the Japanese to commit significantly more troops to defend their positions, disrupting their broader strategy in Burma. By May 1944, the Marauders were shadows of their former selves. Disease and combat casualties had reduced the original 3,000 men to fewer than 1,400 combat-effective soldiers. They had already marched over 750 miles through some of the worst terrain on Earth and fought in 5 major battles plus dozens of smaller engagements. Any reasonable military commander would have evacuated them. Instead, Stilwell ordered them to capture Myitkyina airfield, the most important Japanese position in northern Burma. Success would give the Allies a crucial airbase and cut Japanese supply lines to China. What happened next was pure audacity. The remaining Marauders, reinforced with Chinese troops and Kachin Rangers, executed a brilliant surprise attack on May 17, 1944. They captured the airfield in a dawn assault that caught the Japanese completely off guard. For the first time in the war, the Allies had seized a major Japanese airbase on the Asian mainland. But holding Myitkyina proved even harder than taking it. The Japanese rushed reinforcements to retake the airfield, and what followed was a grinding siege that lasted until August. The Marauders, now barely a functioning unit, held their positions while being reinforced by other Allied troops. By the end of the Myitkyina campaign, the original Marauders unit had essentially ceased to exist as a fighting force. Of the roughly 2,750 men who entered Burma, only 2 were left who had never been hospitalized with wounds or major illness. The unit was officially disbanded on August 10, 1944, and merged into a larger formation called the Mars Task Force. The sacrifice of Merrill's Marauders was extraordinary, but so was their achievement. In slightly more than 5 months, they had accomplished something no other American unit in World War II could claim. They had traversed more jungle terrain on long-range missions than any other U.S. formation in the entire war. Their success helped reopen the Burma Road, allowing vital supplies to reach Chinese forces fighting Japan. They tied down elite Japanese divisions that could have been used elsewhere. Most importantly, they proved that American forces could match the Japanese in jungle warfare, something many had doubted after early defeats in the Philippines and elsewhere. The unit's extraordinary service was recognized with numerous decorations. Every single Marauder received the Bronze Star, a nearly unprecedented honor. The unit earned a Presidential Unit Citation, and individual members received 6 Distinguished Service Crosses, 4 Legions of Merit, and 44 Silver Stars. Perhaps more significantly, the lessons learned from the Marauders directly influenced the development of modern American Special Operations Forces. When the 75th Infantry Regiment was formed in 1954, it traced its lineage directly back to Merrill's Marauders. Today's 75th Ranger Regiment proudly wears the Marauder patch as their unit crest, honoring the legacy of these jungle warriors. Several Marauders, including Japanese-American interpreters Roy Matsumoto, Henry Gasho, and Grant Hirabayashi, were later inducted into the Ranger Hall of Fame for their extraordinary service. The story of Merrill's Marauders isn't just military history, it's a testament to the power of the human spirit under impossible conditions. These men volunteered for a mission they knew might kill them, endured months of unimaginable hardship, and achieved objectives that military experts thought were impossible. Their experience also highlights the importance of realistic planning and proper support for special operations forces. The Marauders succeeded despite being consistently undersupplied and overused, but the cost was devastating. Modern special operations doctrine still studies their campaigns as both an example of what elite forces can achieve and a cautionary tale about their proper employment. In 2020, Congress finally awarded the surviving Marauders the Congressional Gold Medal, recognizing their extraordinary service. Of the original 3,000 volunteers, only 9 were still alive to receive this honor. The Marauders' motto was simple but powerful: anybody can do what we can do. It wasn't boasting, it was a challenge and an inspiration. They proved that ordinary Americans, when pushed to their limits and fighting for each other, could accomplish the extraordinary. Merrill's Marauders were more than just soldiers. They were pioneers who helped create the template for modern special operations forces. They showed that small, highly trained units could achieve strategic objectives far beyond their size, but only at enormous personal cost. Their story reminds us that freedom has always required people willing to volunteer for the dangerous and hazardous missions that others cannot or will not take on. From the jungles of Burma to the mountains of Afghanistan, that legacy continues. The next time you see the Ranger tab on a modern soldier's uniform, remember, it all started with 3,000 volunteers who answered a mysterious call for a dangerous mission in a forgotten corner of World War II. They went in as ordinary Americans and came out as legends. What aspect of their incredible story impressed you most? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from military history.